Have you ever been so sure of something that you never once thought to question it? The ground beneath your feet, the air in your lungs, the person lying next to you at night. I was that sure. My name is Alex, and this is the story of how the woman I loved, Sarah, built a perfect, beautiful world for us, the world I later discovered was made entirely of glass. And all it took was one truth for it to all shatter around me. It started, as the best stories often do, with a meeting that felt like fate. It was a rainy Tuesday in a crowded coffee shop. I was a mess, spilling my latte, scrambling for a seat, feeling completely invisible in the hustle. And then I saw her. She was the calm in the center of the storm, sitting alone at a table for two. She looked up, caught my flustered eye, and smiled. And it wasn't just a smile that lit up her face. It seemed to warm the whole room. She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Looks like you could use a rescue," she said, her voice like laughter. I stumbled over my thanks and we started talking. What was supposed to be a 5-minute courtesy turned into an hour, then 2. We talked about everything and nothing. Our dreams, our favorite terrible movies, the things that scared us, the things that made us feel alive. It wasn't just small talk. It was a conversation that felt like finding a missing piece of yourself you never knew was gone. Her name was Sarah. After that, our relationship didn't just grow. It bloomed spectacularly and fast. It was like we were making up for lost time. Within months, we were inseparable. She knew all my dreams, my desire to start my own graphic design studio, the sleepless nights fueled by a fear of failure, my quiet, secret hope for a family one day. And I knew hers, or at least I thought I did. She wanted stability, she said. A partner she could build a life with. Someone who was loyal and true. She'd been hurt before, she told me one night, her eyes glistening with a past pain that made my heart ache. It made me want to protect her, to be the man who would never, ever cause her that kind of hurt. So I worked tirelessly. I poured every ounce of my energy, every late night, every stolen weekend, into my fledgling business. It was a grind, but having Sarah by my side made it feel like an adventure.
And she was my champion.
I can still picture her, coming into my home office around midnight, placing a warm mug of tea next to my keyboard, her hand resting on my shoulder. "You can do this, Alex," she'd whisper, her breath soft against my ear. "We're in this together. Your success is our success." I'd look up at her, at the unwavering faith in her eyes, and think, this is it. This is what everyone searches for. This is what makes all the struggle worth it. Asterisk. We moved in together into a small apartment that felt like a palace because she was in it. She filled it with plants and light, and the smell of her perfume. We talked about marriage, not in a vague, someday way, but with real intention. We looked at houses online, pointing out features we loved, dreaming of a backyard, a future. We built a future, brick by emotional brick. Every "I love you" felt genuine, weighted with promise. Every plan felt solid, unshakable. I was all in. My heart, my soul, my trust. I handed it all to her, believing with every fiber of my being that she was the safest place for it. I never could have imagined, not in my darkest nightmares, that the very hands I entrusted with my heart were the ones carefully constructing the walls of my cage. Music shifts to a slightly more pensive, uncertain melody. But even in the most beautiful gardens, weeds can grow. The first one was so small, so insignificant, I barely noticed it. We were watching a movie, curled up on the couch, when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her whole body went still for a second. A subtle tension. "I have to take this," she said, and slipped into the bedroom, closing the door behind her. I could hear the hushed, urgent whisper of her voice, but not the words. When she came out 10 minutes later, her smile was back, but it seemed strained. "Everything okay?" I asked. She waved a hand, a little too dismissively. "Just my crazy cousin, you know how she is. Always in some drama." And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I had no reason not to. Then there were the late nights at work that started to become more frequent. "A new project," she'd say, her text short and hurried. Big client. Super demanding. Don't wait up. And I, the supportive boyfriend, would leave a plate of food in the microwave for her, a small note with a heart on it stuck to the lid. She'd come home long after I'd fallen asleep, her side of the bed dipping with a sigh. She'd kiss my cheek, a gesture that once felt like home, but now felt distant.
Rushed.
Like an item on a checklist. My friends, the few who really knew me, started to voice their concerns. Mark, my oldest friend since college, said it over a beer one night. Alex, man, he began, choosing his words carefully. Are you sure about all this? The Sarah you described to us at the beginning, she's never around when we hang out anymore. It just feels off. She's always busy. I don't want you to get hurt. But I defended her. I built the excuses for her, brick by brick, just like I'd built our future. She's ambitious, Mark, I'd tell him, a defensive edge in my voice. She's building her career. It's a tough industry. We're a team. This is what partners do. I was so busy building our future in my head, so invested in the perfect illusion, I was completely blind to the cracks appearing in our present. The foundation of our beautiful life was starting to tremble. And I was about to find out it wasn't built on rock, but on a secret. Sound of a heartbeat, slow and steady at first, then gradually increasing in pace. The human mind is an incredible thing. It can sense a shift in the atmosphere long before the storm hits. A change in tone. A mist I love you. A smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. That's what the next few weeks felt like, the calm before the hurricane. A slow, creeping dread that I kept pushing down, shoving into a dark corner of my mind, telling myself I was being paranoid, that I was sabotaging my own happiness. I was gaslighting myself, and I was doing a brilliant job of it. The climax of this unease came on a day that was supposed to be a celebration. It was the 1-year anniversary of my business, and it was finally, truly profitable. Not just scraping by, but genuinely successful. I'd landed our biggest client yet, a contract that would secure everything. I was floating on air, invincible. I decided to surprise Sarah. I wanted to share this victory with her, to make it ours. I bought her favorite flowers, lilies, a ridiculously expensive bottle of champagne she'd always wanted to try, and I planned to take her to the fancy restaurant where we'd had our first date. This was our victory, too. I couldn't wait to see her face, to see that pride reflected back at me. I got home early. The apartment was silent.
Too silent.
She'd said she'd be home by 6. It was 5:30. I set everything up with a giddy excitement. The flowers in a vase on the table, the champagne chilling in a bucket of ice, 2 crystal flutes waiting. I turned down the lights, lit a few candles. It was perfect. And then I saw it. Her laptop was on the coffee table, slightly open, as if she'd been rushing when she left. A little green light was blinking, indicating a message. A notification. Now, I've never been one to snoop. I believed in privacy, even in a relationship. Trust was everything. But this felt different. It felt like an invitation. A quiet, digital whisper calling my name. My heart started to hammer against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread and a terrible, pulsing curiosity. Asterisk, don't do it, Alex. Walk away. It's nothing. You're being insane. Asterisk, but my feet felt glued to the floor. The seed of doubt, planted weeks ago, had been watered by every hushed call, every late night, every concerned word from Mark. It had grown into a vicious, choking vine, wrapping around my lungs, pulling me towards that screen. With a trembling hand that felt like it belonged to someone else, I opened the laptop. It wasn't password protected. She'd always trusted me. The irony was a physical blow. And there it was. A messaging app one didn't recognize was open, its interface unfamiliar and menacing. A single conversation was at the top. The name wasn't one I knew, Daniel. But the preview of the last message, it stole the air from my lungs. Can't wait to see you tonight, beautiful. Is the situation still on track? The situation? What situation? My blood ran cold, a frigid river of ice replacing the warmth in my veins. My finger, moving on its own volition, clicked on the conversation. And I scrolled. And with every line, With every word, the world I knew, the future I had planned, the love I felt, dissolved into pixels on a screen. It was a history, a timeline of my own deception. It wasn't just one message. It was a tapestry of lies. Plans to meet at hotels I drove past every day. Pet names I thought were sacred were only for me. My love, sweetheart, now shared with a stranger. Discussions about my business, about our money, my income, my expenses, my financial vulnerabilities laid bare for this man to analyze. And then I saw it, the message that broke me, that shattered the last remaining piece of my soul. From Sarah to this Daniel. Don't worry. Alex is completely in the dark. He's so focused on his little business, he doesn't suspect a thing. The transfer goes through next week. Once the money hits our joint account, I'm out. We'll be set. Just have to play the loving girlfriend a little while longer. Sound of a sharp, dramatic musical sting, then silence. His little business. The words echoed in my skull, a taunting, cruel mantra. Play the loving girlfriend. Our joint account. The late nights. The hush phone calls about her crazy cousin. It wasn't ambition. It wasn't stress. It was a calculation. A cold, premeditated financial plan. I was not her partner. I was her mark. Her pawn. A useful idiot funding her escape. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled to the bathroom, falling to my knees, and was violently sick. I gripped the cool porcelain, my body shaking uncontrollably. I caught my reflection in the mirror, a pale, wide-eyed stranger staring back, his entire reality smashed to pieces. The man I was 10 minutes ago was gone. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was financial. It was a demolition of my life, and she was the architect. She wasn't just leaving me for someone else. She was planning to clean me out, to take the fruits of my labor, the symbol of our shared dream, and walk away, laughing with him. The love I felt, it curdled in an instant. It didn't turn to sadness.
Not yet.
That would come later, a deep, endless ache. First, it turned to something else. Something cold and hard and terrifyingly quiet, a rage so pure and focused it felt like clarity. And then I heard it, the distinct sound of her key in the door. My body went on autopilot, a survival instinct I didn't know I possessed. I flushed the toilet, splashed water on my face, and walked back into the living room as she entered. I closed the laptop lid calmly. I walked back to the table and picked up the champagne flute, my hand remarkably steady. "Alex," she said, her voice the same sweet melody I'd fallen in love with. It sounded like a lie, a recording of a song I once loved. "What's all this?" "A surprise," I said, my voice miraculously even, a flat line of emotion. I smiled. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. It felt like stretching my face into a grotesque mask. "We're celebrating. The business. Our future." She kissed me, and for the first time, it felt like a violation. Her lips on mine were a lie. "You're the best," she whispered into my ear, the words now dripping with poison, with condescension. And in that moment, as I held her, as I played my part in her twisted play, a new plan began to form in my mind. It wasn't a plan of passion, of confrontation. It was a blueprint, a strategy. She thought I was in the dark. She thought I would break when she finally made her move. She was playing me, but the game was far from over. In fact, I was just about to change the rules. Music becomes subtle, determined, and strategic. They say when you're in a hole, stop digging. But when someone is trying to bury you alive in that hole, sometimes you have to dig deeper. You have to dig a tunnel right out the other side. The next few days were the most difficult acting performance of my life. I had to be the same, trusting, loving Alex. I had to look into the eyes of the woman who had betrayed me and pretend my world wasn't in ashes. I had to touch her, hold her, and act like my skin wasn't crawling. Every "I love you" I forced out of my mouth felt like swallowing glass. Inside, I was a war room. The grief, the anger, the heartbreak, they were the enemy. I locked them away in a steel box in the deepest part of my mind. They would have to wait. There was no time for falling apart. There was only time for a plan. A precise, calculated, and utterly devastating plan. My revenge wouldn't be loud. It would be silent. It wouldn't be hot. It would be ice cold. My first move was information. I needed to know everything. Who was this Daniel? What was the exact nature of their scheme? I started quietly, like a ghost in my own life. I noted the time she left, the excuses she used. I used a secure, private browser to research digital footprints. I remembered the name from the messaging app. Daniel. A few clever searches on professional networks, and I found him. His name was Daniel Riggs. He was a financial consultant. The irony was almost laughable. A financial consultant helping his girlfriend embezzle from her partner. He was the predator, and I now had his scent. Next, I had to secure my own work. My business was my lifeblood, and it was the primary target. I called my biggest client, the one whose payment was the center of this entire scheme. With a calm, professional voice, I fabricated a story. We're doing a security audit on our primary accounts, I told them, to prevent any potential fraud. Would you mind temporarily routing the next payment to this new, secure account I've set up? They agreed without question. They trusted me. The primary money she was waiting for, the key to her escape, would never, ever touch our joint account. The first pillar of her plan had been silently removed. Then I went to the bank. I asked to speak to a manager in a private room. I sat down, looked her in the eye, and explained, my voice low and steady, that I suspected fraudulent activity on my joint account. I didn't give details, just that I had reason to believe an unauthorized transfer might be attempted soon. I needed to understand the process for freezing it immediately. I didn't freeze it yet. That would alert her, send her running. But I had the paperwork filled out, signed and ready. The trap was being set. The second pillar was rigged to collapse. The most dangerous part was accessing her devices. I needed proof. Concrete, undeniable evidence that would protect me from any lies she might spin. I waited for a night. She came home completely exhausted, stress etched on her face. She had a glass of wine, slumped on the couch, and within 20 minutes, she was asleep, her breathing deep and even. Her phone was on the cushion next to her. My hands were shaking as I carefully, so carefully, picked it up. I held her hand, my heart pounding so loud I was sure it would wake her, and I pressed her thumb to the sensor. The phone unlocked. It felt like a violation, a descent to her level, a moral compromise that made my stomach turn. But this was a war for my survival, and intelligence was key. I quickly went to the messaging app. My thumbs flew across the screen, taking photos of everything. The detailed plans to meet, the discussions about my money, the mocking comments about me, about my trust, about my little business. "He's so naive, it's almost sweet," one of her messages said. I captured it all. I sent the photos to a secure, encrypted email address I'd created just for this. I deleted the sent record from her phone. I placed the phone back exactly where it was, the angle, the position, perfect. My heart was a thunderous drum in the silent room. But she didn't stir. She slept peacefully, unaware that her prey was now the hunter, documenting her crimes. The final piece was the most painful. I had to involve Mark, my oldest friend. I couldn't do this completely alone. I invited him over, and when we were secure, I showed him the evidence on my laptop. I watched the color drain from his face, watched his jaw tighten, his fist clench in raw, unfiltered anger. "I'll kill him," he whispered, his voice tight with a fury I had locked away. "No," I said, my voice chillingly calm, the voice of the war room general. "We're not going to do that. We're not going to scream or fight. We're going to do something much better. We're going to give them exactly what they want and watch them destroy themselves with it." The plan was simple. We would let the situation appear to be perfectly on track. I would pretend the big client payment was delayed by a week due to client processing issues. Sarah bought it, though her frustration was thinly veiled. She was so close to her payday she could taste it. Meanwhile, Mark, who worked in digital media, used his skills to quietly document Daniel. And he hit gold. He discovered Daniel had a history of shady dealings. Several complaints from past clients, a lawsuit for malpractice that was settled out of court. He was a serial predator, and Sarah was his latest accomplice. This wasn't his first rodeo. The information was like a weapon handed to us. The stage was set. The pieces were in place. The transfer date, the day she planned to empty the account and vanish from my life, was tomorrow. She thought it was her finish line, the end of the con. But I was waiting for her there. Not broken, not defeated, but ready. Ready to show her that the table she had set for my destruction was now mine to turn. Music builds to a high tension, dramatic crescendo, then holds a single, suspenseful note. The day of the supposed transfer dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself was holding its breath, waiting for the drama to unfold. Sarah was different, buzzing with a nervous, excited energy. She was extra sweet, extra attentive, the performance of her life entering its final act. She made me coffee. She talked about our future with a glitter in her eyes that I now recognized not as love, but as sheer, unadulterated greed. She was counting the hours, the minutes, until she could press the button on her new life, a life built on the ruins of mine. "So, the payment should clear today, right, honey?" she asked, trying to sound casual as she stirred her coffee, but I could hear the underlying tremor of anticipation. "The bank said by 3 p.m., I replied, taking a sip of the coffee she'd made. It tasted like ash, like betrayal. "It's a big day for us." "The biggest," she said, leaning in to kiss my forehead. The gesture felt like a brand. I changed the locks, a symbolic and practical act of reclaiming my space. I closed the joint account, severing the last financial tie. I poured myself into my work and my business, finally freed from the dark, parasitic shadow of her scheme, began to thrive like never before. The creativity came back, the joy in the work returned. It was mine again. My friends, especially Mark, were my rock. They never said, "I told you so." They were just there, with a beer, with a stupid movie, with their presence. And their unwavering loyalty reminded me of what that word truly means. It's not a performance. It's just being there. I heard through the grapevine, as one does, about the fallout. Daniel lost his license and most of his clients. The email had done its job with brutal efficiency. He and Sarah apparently tried to make it work for a few weeks, clinging to each other in the wreckage of their own making. But a relationship born from betrayal and greed, well, it doesn't have a very strong foundation. It collapsed, predictably, under the weight of its own failure, of blame and recrimination. Last I heard, she had moved to another city. A fresh start, built on nothing. No money, no trust, no integrity. Just nothing. So, what's the lesson in all of this? What did I learn from having my heart and my finances nearly destroyed? It's not that love is a lie, or that you should never trust anyone. That's the easy, cynical conclusion, and it's a prison of its own. The lesson is about awareness. Love should not make you blind. Trust should not mean turning off your own mind, ignoring the quiet voice of your intuition. The red flags are always there. We just choose, out of love or hope or fear of being alone, to see them as simple flags, to explain them away, to paint them in colors that don't alarm us. I learned that the greatest revenge isn't violence or screaming matches. It isn't sinking to their level. The greatest, most powerful revenge is to remain calm, to be smarter, to protect your peace at all costs, to take the lesson, learn from the pain, and use it to build a better, stronger, and truer life without them. To become so unbreakable, so secure in who you are and what you deserve, that their attempt to shatter you becomes the very thing that forges your strength. The fire that was meant to consume you only tempers your steel. She played me, and she expected I'd break. She thought my heart, my capacity for love and trust, would be my downfall. But she was wrong. I used my mind. I stayed calm. I turned the table. And in doing so, I didn't just win a battle against her. I won back my own life, my peace, my future. And that, in the end, was the only victory that ever truly mattered. Music swells gently and then fades